Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Bufnagle, the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Bob,
America's favorite rocket scientist.
that I am, and we've got a great show for you today. However, I wouldn't want to do this alone, so let's bring Rafe back on, my co-host for today. Rafe, how are you doing?
Hey, Bob, I'm fantastically wonderful. It's great to be doing a podcast with you. It's Harry has been filling in the last 2 weeks, and what's wonderful about the Buffnagle family is we have a veritable smorgasbord, treasure trove of potential guest hosts that we can bring in on a moment's notice to help us bring you the content that you deserve. So,
Well,
um,
I'll take the treasure trove part. I'm not so sure about the smorgasbord.
I'm not even sure I could spell smorgasbord. All
I'm
right.
pretty sure I could barely pronounce it. So,
Well, anyway, I want to thank our listeners here. Thank you, Bob, for co-hosting today, but I want to thank our listeners even more because without them, it's just another phone call between us. So,
which is
thank.
not a bad thing,
No,
but
well, we'll see how this goes
we'll
tonight.
see. We'll see
Zach
what
is
they
not here
think
to keep
after
us in
this.
line. We're not even getting through the intro script here. All right, so
It's going to
all
be one
right,
of those.
the listeners, hey, you guys give us a reason to be here and a reason to record all this stuff. As usual, Buffnagle at buffnagle.com. We appreciate your cards and letters. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, all those places. If there's a platform we need to be on and we are not there, well, you know what? Let us know. We'll get on there. If you are new to our podcast, hey, welcome. Thanks for coming. We are very glad you're here. And we're going to ask you to give us 4 episodes, and in return, we will give you a reason to come back. We're talking about a lot of different things. You never know what is going to show up, but we're going to be talking about something important, probably at least something that resonates with you. And remember, if you tell a friend to listen, you will get a free episode. And don't forget, if you're listening on your phone or one of those machines that has a subscribe button on there or a follow button, hit that button. Do it right now. Go push the button, right? And get subscribed there and tell your friends about that stuff. That helps us at the end. Bob, once again, thanks for joining me.
I'm more than happy to join, even on short notice.
Yeah, it was a little bit of short notices.
Yeah. So, what you want to record that now?
Well,
So
why not? It's just you got
it's
time, I
on.
got time, right?
It's good. Yeah, we were, and in fact, we were talking right before we started the session about the most recent episode with your dad, which was absolutely fascinating. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and anyone who hasn't already listened to episode 44 should finish listening to this episode and then immediately go back and listen to that
You don't
one.
think they should stop right here, hit pause, and go,
Well,
and then come
they
back? Or
could actually, maybe they should, because then some of the things we might talk
that's a good
about
point.
might make more
Right.
sense.
So
So,
we'll wait. We'll wait right
okay.
here while you listen.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Hey,
All right.
welcome back.
So yes. And what an amazing story. I mean, the one that fascinated me the most, what that really got to me, was in talking about the goats and how he described the house and the size of the house and the number of rooms in the house, which was not very many, especially compared to what we think about now as a small house.
Yeah, and I keep getting it mixed up because he tells these stories, and like when I was a kid, we went to go visit my grandparents in Minnesota, and they lived in New Ulm, right? ULM, New Ulm. It's named after Ulm, a place in Germany, right?
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but but my grandfather, he being an Irishman, he didn't like Germany, so until his dying day, he said New Elm. He didn't want to pronounce it German. So yeah, and he was upset when his son married a Betthauser, but he came around, and I think they all got along swimmingly at the end. So that was a good thing. But we would visit them in New Ulm, and this was when they were, they were grandparents at this point. They were in their 50s and 60s, and it was a little house then that they had moved to in town there in New Ulm. But the house my dad grew up in out in Curry, which was like, man, I looked it up on the map when we did the episode, and apparently the train line ended at Curry. So there was you're in model railroading, Bob.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so there was a locomotive turnaround in
A
Curry,
turntable.
Minnesota. A
Okay,
turntable.
sure.
In fact, if you go to the Google Maps satellite photo-y thing,
I'm really resisting the urge to go do that right
oh,
now,
you
but keep
shouldn't. You know
talking.
what?
I'm not
Succumb,
doing it.
Bob. Succumb.
No, not while we're talking.
Okay, so but just north of Curry's this little tiny town. It's got like 9 streets in it. 4 this way, 5 that way, and just north of town is this park now. It's called like the Railroad Park or something, and the turntable is still there. You can see it in the satellite photo.
Nice.
And my dad said that his mom said that they like all the people in town would help turn around the locomotive. Like they'd go and like the
Really?
locomotive. Yeah. So okay. So for those of you out there in that are not in railroad land, the train would come in, and then the locomotive wants to pull the train, not push it, right? So you either need a gigantic loop of track to turn the train around, which is very
Takes a
expensive.
lot of space.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Or what you do is you like pull the cars off to the side on a siding, and you drive the locomotive onto this turntable. It's a piece of track a little bit longer than the locomotive. You drive the locomotive onto that. You spin the turntable around 180 degrees, pi radians for those of you who are mathematically inclined. All right, and then you drive the locomotive off the other way, hook up the cars, and you go back to Chicago or wherever it was. But that's still there, Bob. You can see that in the satellite photos.
Oh, that's
It's
awesome.
amazing, tiny little town. So next time you're driving out through western Minnesota on your way to, I guess South Dakota's the next one over. We would go visit my parents out there, my grandparents in New Ulm, and it was a little house. I cannot imagine how small the little 500 square foot house was that the sheep got loose in.
Well,
My
yeah. And as he described it, there's a living room, there's a kitchen, and there's 2 bedrooms. And I'm thinking, how many? First of all, the first thought I went through my mind was, how many kids did he say again? And there were 2 bedrooms.
Over the course of 24 years, he has 7 sisters and a brother, and they lived in that little house and raised up the family there. But you're right, there were 4 bedrooms there, and 4 rooms, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and the living room. But you know what he didn't mention, Bob?
No.
What was not in
Where?
the house? What was not in the
Yes.
house? Right?
Where did they go to the
Or the bathroom,
bathroom?
and that was out in the that was out. Out was the
Yes,
outhouse, right?
out in the house.
Out in the outhouse. It
And
is
where did they wash clothes? And
it is interesting. I have this picture of him. Let me rephrase it. I don't have the picture. I think he's still got the picture.
yeah,
But it's a picture from the probably about 19. He was probably 16, 17 years old, and he's standing at the house. All right, he's standing in front of the house, and he is a young man of, like I said, 17 years old. He's wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt, and he's kind of pretty buff because he was working on the farm, and he's no shoes. All right, and his pants legs are rolled up like they used to in the 50s, and it's him and a sister of his sitting on the front step, and the front step was like it looked to me like a poured piece of concrete, maybe 30 inches wide, and 30 by 30. And you can see the house in the background, and the corners are up on rocks, and it's suspended up off the soil so that the air could blow underneath, so like it didn't kill everybody in the summer when it got 800 million degrees out there. And there was a picture. It was him, sister, the house, and the step, and everything else in the picture is dirt. It's just dirt. It's dirt everywhere. It's dirt on him, and it's on the step, and it's just, there might have been a tree in the background maybe. But when I said to him that I see him as a dirt farmer, that's the picture that comes to mind, and I keep trying to imagine living that life. I mean, I don't like dusty, dirty. I don't. It's like just like we sweep the floors all the time, and we run the vacuum cleaner, and
Hmm.
man, I even sweep my workshop. So it's a
I have a hard time imagining living on a dirt road, for example. My brother lives, his house is off a dirt road, and even that alone to me is more than I would care for.
right, and everything was dirt around there. It was
Yeah,
just all dirt. It was all dirt. And but you know what? There are other places in this solar system, Bob, that have a lot of dirt.
there are, and Mars would be one of them.
Yeah.
And
So
when we last talked about Mars, we've had two episodes where we were talking about Mars, and last time we talked about how to get to Mars, the orbital mechanics, things like that, and then we kind of got into a conversation of how cold and hostile the planet really is, compared to maybe what you were thinking. And that led us down a whole path. But one of the things we never really talked about was, how would you live? How would humans, if we were sending humans to Mars, if we were going to Mars, like we had talked about originally, how would they live? What would living be like on the way there, on the way back, and while you were living there? You have a 6 month trip there. You might have a year or two on Mars, if not longer, and then a 6 month trip back. What would that be like? What are the problems that need to be addressed or solved? And you know, how do you live on Mars?
well, that's we talked about the movie The Martian, at
Yes,
one of those episodes,
I think we
and
did both of them, but
yeah,
yeah.
and there's a model, right, for how to do that, and they are living in, I guess you could just call them inflatable huts, very carefully airlocked so as to not lose that precious commodity, air and proper pressure, and and then he does the miraculous thing of actually growing crops on Mars, which he claims that makes him a colonizer. Is that what was that the word he says?
I can't remember. It's been a while since
Yeah.
I've seen the
So anyway,
movie,
but he
but
grows crops on Mars,
I
grows
think he
sweet
was
potatoes.
the Mars's greatest botanist or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
or something like that. Looking back on that, because I talked to my dad about what it was like to live there in Minnesota in the winter. And for those of us who grew up in northern climates, you're in one right now, Bob. You're
Oh
in
yeah,
Michigan.
I'm
Yeah.
in Michigan. I grew up in Michigan.
Whenever I think of cold, I always think snow. I mean, it is the thing in my head that relates to cold is always snow. And that place on Mars, there's unless you're at the poles, it's not really. I mean, we talked about it raining. Um,
Raining carbon
raining
dioxide.
carbon
The
dioxide.
air literally falls out of the sky.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah,
But there's not a lot of snow there. There's not a lot of. The only thing that blows around is dust and dirt.
right.
Um, if the wind has enough energy to move it around. Um, it's a really cold, very inhospitable place. My dad told this story, and he didn't tell it on the episode. For
Oh,
those of you who haven't
please,
listened yet,
please share.
yeah, yeah. So he said one winter. Okay, so they lived in this house that was up above the prairie, and what they would do in the winter, they pack like hay bales around
Okay, I
to
was wondering
reduce.
that. Yeah, when you said in the summer it's up, but yeah, what does that do in the wintertime? So
Yeah,
they would
well,
insulate it during
yeah.
the winter.
So that's like if you have a crawl space, that's like closing and opening those little. Do you have a crawl
I've
space? You have a
I've
basement.
never been in a house with a crawl space.
Yeah. So the crawl space is just an open space under the house, and in the summer you will often open up a little vent, and allows
Okay.
the air to pass through, and in the winter you close those up so that your pipes don't freeze and things like that. But he said one summer they decided they were going to dig a basement, or one winter they were going to dig a basement in the winter because you don't have any farming to do, so you
You have
dig the
time on your
base.
hands. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so it is a remarkable story about trying to figure out how to do something like this in the winter when you have plenty of time but not a lot of equipment, and it's just a bunch of guys. So is my dad and his brother, and then my grandpa and his brother. So it was Par and Lenny were the kids, and then Melvin and Floyd was my grandpa. Grandpa was Melvin, Floyd was his brother, and he tells the story that they tried all sorts of they tried to be really efficient with that, because they would apparently had a cellar that was a very small little thing, but they were going to dig it out to a full basement so they could store all the stuff that they would can, and they would, they made preserves, and they preserved everything during the summer on the farm, because that's how you got through the winter. But they would, they started digging it and hauling the dirt out with buckets, and shovels. And then somebody got the bright idea to go to they had a corn crib and an elevator to lift, not an elevator like in a building, but a big conveyor belt that lifts grain up and dumps it into the silo, right?
Yeah.
So somebody got the brilliant idea. So let's take the elevator off the silo, and let's put the end of it down into the hole that we're digging. And what we'll do is we'll back the manure. It's funny to hear the story. We'll back the manure spreader up to the top of the elevator, then of this big conveyor thing.
Mm-hmm.
We'll hook the tractor. We'll take the PTO on the tractor, the power takeoff on the tractor. Okay, for what it's worth, a power takeoff on a tractor is not a thing that makes it fly.
Not like a jet assisted takeoff.
No. It's a power takeoff. So the engine on the tractor has an axle that you can connect other stuff to, like if you wanted to run an elevator. So they apparently hooked the elevator from the grain silo up to the PTO on the tractor, and they put the grain elevator, the manure spreader on the end, and they put the other end of it down in the hole, and they were like, well, let's turn it on and let's get going. So they turned it on, and it's running around and around and around. And then they would shovel the dirt onto the elevator and have it drag it up and dump it into the manure spreader. Well, soil in Minnesota weighs a lot more. It's a lot more dense
than grain.
And apparently, and this thing, the lift mechanism is a series of, it's two chains. It's a chain on both sides, and then like a ladder of connecting chains between the two. And apparently the chains broke every time they turn around, and the elevator little things would break, or it would get stuck, or the PTO would fall off, and then they got the dirt into the manure spreader, and then they had to go spread it around. And they spent a week just toying with the idea of trying to get the manure spreader to lift the dirt out of the hole of the basement they were digging under the house that they were living in the winter.
Wow.
And
I would not have thought of doing that.
Yeah, but and of course they thought of doing it. They actually tried it. They had something that kind of worked, but then it failed, right? And then eventually I think they got somebody who had a backhoe to kind of help them out dig. But that's the kind of stuff they did. I mean, they just had they had the equipment. They were like, we got the time. It's winter. Let's dig the basement. And that's the thing they did. It was so if you're living on Mars, you're going to need equipment. You're going to need like tools, and I don't think you'll need a grain elevator, but you're going to need stuff, and you're going to need guys that know how to fix things
and make things. And yes, it's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting problem. I mean, even something as simple as clothes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We were talking, where did they wash the clothes in this small house? And, we have I have a laundry room, and it's got laundry machines,
It's got machines, right?
Yeah. And it's got a washer and a dryer. And I'm guessing that house didn't have those things.
I'm sure it had a clothesline.
Okay.
And it
outside.
might have had, it might have had that wash tub. My mother's sister, they were the cousins that we were closest to. My dad had 7 sisters and a brother, but they lived in Minnesota and we were in Wisconsin. And my mother's sister was actually in Wisconsin as well. So we saw them very regularly. And I do remember she had my uncle and my aunt. My uncle was a funeral director, right? He was a mortician.
Okay.
And they lived above the funeral home.
Okay.
So when we would visit their house, in the garage was a black station wagon and a hearse.
Okay.
That was in the garage.
Yep.
All right. And there was a door in the garage that went into the basement of the funeral home, where they kept all sorts of funeral-y stuff.
Yep.
So like caskets,
Yeah.
fluid,
Stuff. Yeah.
bodies, that kind of stuff. We're like in that was like on the other side of that. I'm a little kid, Bob. Okay,
Yes.
I'm like
Yes.
6 or 4, right? And I know through that door
Yeah.
there's that
Yes.
place. So we would go upstairs, and they lived above the funeral home, Bob.
Yeah.
It was creepy as hell. It was just like, ugh. I, and
Okay.
my mom's mom also lived in a funeral home. I was surrounded by death as a child. It was very traumatic.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Well,
Well,
anyway,
where you were going somewhere with
yes, I know.
this.
Okay, so
Okay.
but
Thank you.
at the mortician's house, in their garage, they had a tub washer.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I guess you scrub on there, and then they would run it through the wringer, right? So these two rollers that go past each other, and
And
that's
the
how you.
clothes and not your fingers.
Yeah, you send the clothes through. Don't send your fingers through. And occasionally they would break the buttons, right?
Yep.
And it would squeeze the water out, and then they'd hang them out to dry. And I'm sure that my dad, if they had I can't imagine they had a machine. Why would they have a machine? They have kids, right? And
Yeah.
they have hands, and
Yeah.
I'm sure they washed them out in a tub,
Yep.
hung them on the line, and in the winter you hope that they dried before they froze. Can you do that on Mars?
Well, it's interesting because just thinking about on the space station, the clothes that they wear there. So we've had the ISS, the International Space Station, up in orbit for I think 20 years. I think we
Yeah,
just
decades.
passed
Yeah.
the 20-year anniversary. And the they the way they handle clothes is they get new clothes, they wear them until presumably they're not wearable anymore from a smell point of view, maybe, I don't know, and then they dispose of them.
Do they
and
just
they and they have a constant stream. That's one of the things that keeps being
get
sent up
his
in
food and
supply
clothes?
ships. Yeah, is new clothes. And
Wow.
so that really doesn't work if you're going to spend 6 months going to Mars and who knows how long on Mars, or 6 months going back. That's not something that doesn't um, transfer well to a trip to Mars, because you aren't going to have ships resupplying you.
With anything.
Uh, yeah, certainly for the 6 month trip out there, and even when you're there. So the question is, even something as simple as washing clothes. How do you do that?
And if you don't, then you got to bring 2 years worth of clothes. What do you
Yes.
wear them a week? I mean, is this like,
Right.
and
Yeah. How long could you wear a t-shirt and, some pants, even
are you asking me?
sweatpants?
You're asking me. You're implying I've done the experiment.
No, no, it was a rhetorical question, but if you have data, because I know you're a data-driven kind of
I do
guy,
have data on a, well, let's just,
have you done it for a week
the
is the
statistician
question.
would say that all of my data, um, I've never reached the point where I've had to change them because of that.
Okay.
So all my data are censored. But you can go a couple days with a t-shirt. I mean,
Sure.
you're a
Sure.
camper, right? You're
Yeah.
right. So, but they do start smelling bad. And
I can say that I've gone hiking in the mountains when I go visit Colorado. I've gone hiking in the mountains and used the same shirt a few times. And one time I used it one time too many. And so I felt bad for anybody around me as I was walking, hiking up the trail.
but okay. So here's what I'm thinking. Okay, I'll be real honest. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm sure other people are thinking this too. All right, you're talking t-shirts, but there's underwear too. All right, and
Yeah.
that's a bodily thing that you got to take care of. And there are some issues with that. Like, so I was thinking, well, what if you get sick, like intestinally sick? But would you get sick in Mars? You wouldn't get biologically sick, probably, right? I mean, unless you took that germ with you, you'll probably be
That's
pretty free of infection. I gotta believe you'd be pretty free of infection during the trip, right?
that's yeah, one yeah, that's interesting. I never actually thought of that. But yeah, you have a point there.
Unless you
I've
like
never
open up a
actually, and
food bag and there's
I
maybe
don't recall
botulism in there or
reading
something.
anything about that particular topic. I mean, the things you read about and you hear about are things like radiation. The sun.
Yeah.
You have two different uh, sources of radiation. One is the sun, because the sun is, while it looks pretty chill up in the sky there, it looks pretty calm in visible light. looking through the Earth's atmosphere. But when you look at it in all the different wavelengths of light, and beyond the visible light into infrared and the higher frequencies as well, X-rays and things like that. I mean, it is an amazingly active body. I mean, the sun it's a fire burning. And it looks like a fire burning.
Well, it's more than that. It's like this nuclear fusion thing going on, right?
Yes, the sun is a massive incandescent gas, a gigantic nuclear furnace. You have to let me say
so we're here on the Earth, and around us is this layer of air, which protects us from a couple of things. So, but you say when you see it if you see it from the non-visible light spectrum, like it's shooting out all sorts of other stuff, X-rays and gamma
it's amazing.
rays.
I mean, anybody who hasn't should go look at the NASA YouTube channel and then go to I think it's the Goddard Space Flight Center has the solar stuff, and because they have one of the spacecraft that monitors the sun, and it's amazing stuff.
But the atmosphere protects us from a lot of that bad stuff, right? I mean, not all of it.
The atmosphere, but even more than the atmosphere is the magnetosphere. So the Earth is a dynamo because of the metal core,
right?
And it's spinning. So it creates a field that is basically a magnetic bubble that keeps us protected.
Wait. So it's
don't ask me the details.
So I gotta go here. People
man, you called me, and then 10 minutes later, you want me to record an episode. I did not prepare for this.
You didn't prepare for the Okay, but it's magnetic, right? So it's a magnet, right? So there's a north and south pole on the magnet.
Yes.
And they actually
and there's field lines between them,
right?
And those
does
lines.
Does the spinning affect the magnetic stuff?
The way I remember it, yes. But again,
really,
any of the listeners who have questions should consult Wikipedia, among other places. Look up Sol, the sun.
Sol, yes. The sun, not Geo, the Earth, Gaia.
All right, we're not going there.
All right, so if we're on our way to the Mars.
We're on the way to Mars.
Do they have a
red
thing?
Planet?
Are they magnetic?
They don't have anything like that.
Really?
So yeah, it's the Earth. That is one of the things that allows us to, live, and for life to have, formed here on the Earth, is we had that protection from the stuff coming out of the sun, and some of the stuff coming out of the sun is pretty energetic. I mean, when you see the aurora in the northern, what they call northern lights, or the aurora borealis and the aurora australis in the southern hemisphere, I mean, that is charged particles from the sun
getting drawn to the pole,
running into the magnetic field lines around the Earth, and then spiraling down into the atmosphere near the poles. And they, the interaction between those charged particles and the atmosphere generates photons, light.
Yep.
And so
very pretty pictures.
Amazing.
Have you seen them?
I've absolutely seen them. I can't remember what year it was. It was shortly after I moved into this house, so it was late or mid to late 90s. There was a particularly energetic solar storm that impacted the Earth, and I initially noticed it before I was going to bed. I looked to the north because the backside of my house faces north, and I always look out, see what's going on in the sky, and I noticed kind of a green glow, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe we got some, maybe
the chemical plant's on fire.
Maybe, maybe this might be an interesting night, and it just kept getting higher and higher in the sky. And I remember being out on the deck, which is, in the back of the house, on the north side of the house, lying in a lounge chair, lying on my back, lawn chair, and just looking straight up at the sky, and having the northern lights filling the sky.
And you're in southern Michigan, right?
I'm in southern mid Michigan.
Yeah.
and it doesn't get down this far like that. That was, I'd have to look it up to find out. I never bothered to look it up to remind myself of when that was, but it was sometime 96, 97. It
Wow.
was, yeah, it was quite a storm, and I've never seen anything like that since. But yes, so I have seen them.
All right, so the particles come from the sun. They're all charged up, being all bad particles, and the magnetic sphere sucks them to the poles. Boom. We don't, and I don't
So
get
we're
cancer,
good.
right?
We're
And I
good
don't get
here on the
cancer.
Earth.
Yep.
But you
Go to
leave that
Mars.
protective bubble and you head to Mars, let alone being on Mars, but you head to Mars, and if the sun happens to point one of those
Jets of,
blasts
yeah.
your way, you need to do something because it's gonna those charged particles are gonna do you harm. And so one of the things that has to be planned for on a trip to Mars would be a safe space where you can go while a solar storm passes.
So like an iron box, right? I mean,
Iron would
something.
be very heavy,
Well, that right. That's what I was going to say.
but there are materials that either are not necessarily that light, but that you need, like water, that will help.
Lunar electric
Or
water,
there
probably.
are, yes, could be, this would be solar electric water.
Solar. Oh
Again,
man,
yet
lemon
another,
flavor.
this
Okay.
one's got to be lemon flavored, of course. And it's got a big smiling sun,
Yes, it does.
the massive incandescent gas, So, um, and yeah, so you've got that. That's one thing you have to contend with. And the other, there's plastics that will help
Yeah,
mitigate that. The other is cosmic rays, and those are coming from
from everywhere.
any direction. Yes, every direction. And they wouldn't necessarily be, so on Earth. Again, we have the atmosphere. The atmosphere soaks those up
Right.
and splits them up, and they hit particles in the atmosphere, and they kind of shower down, and they're they are mostly harmless. And but on the if you're out there on your way to Mars, you're getting those things full force, and so you want to have some protection, for that as well. And you have, you can take some radiation. The human body can handle some radiation up to a certain point, and you want to stay below certain limits.
Now you said when one conversation we had a long time ago that when we went to the moon with the Apollo missions, that
Yes.
when those guys went there, they were the let me make sure I get it right. The command module, the service module, and the LEM. When they were going there, it spun, right? I mean, it rotated like a rotisserie, right?
Yes, and that wasn't because of the radiation.
It was just heat.
That was thermal. Yeah, that was heat from the sun, because when you're in a vacuum like that, you have, dissipating the heat isn't as easy as when you're in a atmosphere, and you have the air to carry away the heat. So you have, on one side of you have the sun, full force of the sun, without the
Without, yep,
air to soften that any.
yep.
And on the other side, you've got this basically cold sink, which is all
The
of
vacuum
empty
of space.
space.
Yep, yep.
Yes, the vacuum of space on the other
How
side.
cold could that be?
You know, it's
That's pretty
it's
cold.
like, I vaguely remember, like 200 degrees plus Fahrenheit and 200 degrees minus Fahrenheit, something like that. On one side or the other of the spacecraft. And so what they would do is, in order to smooth that out a little bit, they would rotate the spacecraft. I think it was once an hour, or once every 2 hours. It would
Really, that's
spin on it.
slowly. That's
Yeah,
slowly.
it just, it's barbecue rotisserie,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they called it the barbecue roll.
Yeah. Okay.
And, when they would stop that to do like television broadcasts, because they had to point the main
The
antenna
antenna. Oh wow.
towards the Earth. So whenever they were doing like a TV show showing the big round blue Earth, or the moon coming up to, that they were coming up to, they would stop that and point the antennas. So
Oh
yeah,
wow. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
yeah,
All right.
uh,
So going to Mars, you got to protect this spacecraft from all this stuff that comes from the one thing that's keeping us all alive, right? Which is the sun. Um,
you
could
need
you?
Go
Could
ahead.
you do that magnetically? I mean, could you like charge the thing and suck everything to the ends or
Again,
something?
it's an engineering problem, and
Yeah.
there's
Okay.
engineering trade-offs. How heavy is it? How much energy does it need? And can you bring the enough generation capability to generate that energy? Saying, can you do that? As an engineer, it's like
It's like, yes,
we
we
can we
can.
can solve all kinds of problems. It's just, you have to balance, what are the balancing effects? If I have all the time in the world, if I have all the money in the world, I can solve a lot of problems that
Yep.
way, you know. But, if you've got constraints, yes, that gets harder.
All right.
So,
So we get to the moon or get to the Mars. All right.
yep, we
And
get to
we
Mars.
hop in our Mars Bufnagle Winnebago machine. All right. And we live there a while for 2 years.
You
Wow.
got
You
you got
got to,
food. Let's,
you're
whether
going to
it's
send space
on
food
the
sticks
trip,
up there, right? A couple
you get,
semis full.
whether it's 6 months on the trip or longer, and yeah, while you're there, you got to eat. There's not very long you're going to go without getting real hungry. So yeah, there's another thing to solve, and you can only stored food only gets you so far. And one of the things I keep hearing about that topic, the topic of food, is that the nutritional value of food starts breaking down. I mean, as it's stored. I mean, you can't just keep it in the freezer. I mean, think about what happens to meat in your freezer,
Right. Well,
for,
everything you eat that's any good is an organic compound, and we
yeah,
know they just break down.
yeah, they just do. And so,
Wow.
you've got to think about, how do I grow food, especially fresh things that, you're, with the vitamins and minerals your body needs. And so that's
So
another problem
you're
that you
saying
want to
we
solve.
can't eat hardtack for 3 years?
Um, I'm not going to say we can't, because, you guys did
Yes,
you did the episode with Magellan, and
they made it
those
through.
guys,
Wow.
it still astounds me. I mean, people going to Mars will have it easier than that, I believe,
Uh,
in most respects.
Physics, other or they won't go. Right. I mean,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah, yes.
If on the condition that we're going, it's not going to be that. It's not going to be
It's
the
not going to be as
Magellan
bad
timeline.
as Magellan's trip. Although, the thing with Magellan's trip was, they could go swimming in the ocean, they could stop on a beach somewhere. There's no beach between here and Mars, and there's really no beach on Mars either.
The whole thing's a
So,
beach, right? It's just
well,
a
it's
rock beach, a very cold,
very
very low.
cold.
Oh, just all right. And then
So,
they got to get back,
yeah.
and you can't wash your clothes.
Well, that's a problem to be solved. So, it's not I'm not bringing it up to say it's a reason why we can't go. This is something we haven't done yet, that
But it's a
that
condition.
needs to be
That's a
addressed.
thing
Yes,
that has to
yes,
be solved. It's
yep.
of the 8
And
million things that need to be solved. That's one of them.
and it's probably easier to solve the problem once you get to Mars, because you got some gravity on Mars. Mars
Yeah.
Mars Mars has gravity, and so it might be easier to have a clothes washer on Mars than it would be during the trip. Because if you have weightlessness for 6 months, then solving the problem of a clothes washer in weightlessness is different than solving the problem of a clothes washer when you've got gravity, because we've really already solved that problem.
We know how to make a clothes washer, right?
Yeah,
That's what you're saying, right?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a solved problem
So
with
somebody's
gravity.
job when we get to Mars is to do all the laundry from the 6 month trip. That's
And maybe that's it.
I,
Maybe you have 6 months worth of clothes, and you use them all up on the way there, and then you wash them when you get there,
right,
right?
and then
And you have enough clothes to last you how long it takes to wash the 6 months worth of clothes.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder. Okay, so I'm thinking about that. So the clothes smell bad because they've been on you. I wonder
Or
if you just
you. They've been
they've
on
been on you.
you.
They've been on me. They've been on me for 6 months or however long it's been, and they smell like me because I'm organic, right? And I have
Yes.
stuff that comes out of me and gets oils and
Yeah.
sweats and
Stuff.
stuff. And but if I take that and put it outside in this low pressure, very cold environment, I think it's like I gotta imagine a lot of that stuff just You just
W-
need
Would it
very non-wicking fabric to just let everything, all the bad stuff, just boom, evaporate out. Just take it
would that
outside,
work?
shake it,
Okay.
boom.
And then
Bufnagle dry
see,
cleaning
you've
right
solved
there
the
on
problem. Bufnagle,
Martian
the
dry cleaning.
yep,
That's
dry
what we'll do.
cleaning.
We'll just
How
take it
about
out
that?
there, put it in a vacuum, suck all the bad stuff out of your clothes.
So it wouldn't freeze dry it.
Well,
It
yeah. Well,
might,
see, that's the thing. It's just all right.
well,
Well, I guess
okay.
we'll have to solve
We
that
need to
problem.
get the Bufnagle scientists to work on that.
So are there? I mean, we said it before, and I left the last episode, and we're running low on time here, so I want to just finish on this. So like we finished that last episode, and I was a little bit I kind of
You went
crashed.
from the highest high to the
Yep.
lowest low.
Yeah.
So
And then
hopefully
but then
we're
I
coming
rebounded a little
back
bit,
to the middle.
coming
Yes.
back to the middle. But do you, like I hear these problems, and I'm not opposed to not doing something because it's hard. And it's like what? I mean, I do this podcast with I mean, come on, that's the epitome of technological wonder, right? Is what we're doing here. So I'm not opposed to doing it because it's hard. I still keep wondering these are some problems tonight that we talked about that I hadn't thought about, and I'm sure other people are talking about. Are people saying when these problems keep getting raised that it still seems to them? Does it still seem worth it to go?
I think the people who think we should go to Mars believe we should go to Mars because it is the next thing we should be doing. It is, in some respects, our destiny to leave the Earth and go out into the universe. And so there's going to be problems no matter what you do. You're going to have problems to solve, but those are challenges. I mean,
Right.
it's a challenge to be addressed. It doesn't necessarily mean that's not to me. That's not, and even to me, that's not the reason not to go. I mean, we can solve engineering problems. That's I mean, I've been an engineer all my life. I was born an engineer, quite honestly, and there we can solve problems. We know how to do that, and
So you think it's just a matter of will, then, right?
it's a human question. It's
Yeah.
do we have the courage to go? Can we justify? Do we have the justification to go? Is there a reason to go? And a reason might be enough of a reason might be, depending on the person, because it's out there.
Yeah.
Same reason for climbing Mount Everest, for going to the moon, anything like that. Because it's there.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Wow. Bob, thank you for filling in as our guest host tonight. It is I say this every time, but I can't say it enough. Is thank you for being a part of this with us. It's great to have you on, and I look forward to getting Zach back here in a couple episodes. So I appreciate you coming on, and I know our listeners do too.
Thank you. And as always, it is an absolute pleasure for me to join the Bufnagle the podcast. And I look forward to the next time I might be invited back. Thank everybody for listening.
Absolutely.
And remember to seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.